Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. The man, the myth, the legend. André Rieu is thought to be the most alive and exciting musician we have today. But watch how he breaks the hearts of all his fans as he finally takes his last breaths. André Rieu built his whole career on the idea that music never dies. He made waltzes feel like a song for regular people, not something stuck in old Vienna concert halls. For decades, he promised his orchestra would play in every corner of the world. But when he came to Mexico in 2024, the promise broke. He got sick after 2 shows and 4 more concerts were called off. Thousands of fans who had waited for years to see him were left outside empty concert places. The world didn't get answers. They got silence. The show's statement only said illness. It didn't explain why one of the world's hardest working performers suddenly stopped. His son Pierre, who runs the orchestra, faced angry crowds and upset concert organizers. People were asking if this was the end. That silence made something darker happen. Social media pages started saying he was gone. Fake death announcements spread. Within hours, hashtags and fan pages treated it like a goodbye. This wasn't the first time sickness had stopped him. In 2010, a virus infection in his inner ear left him dizzy and unable to perform. He said later it was the worst time of his life. Concerts were cancelled across Europe. He was stuck in bed for weeks and said that he thought he might never come back. Fans who remembered that breakdown right away made comparisons. Was the same thing happening again? Behind the Mexico cancellation were details people only learned in pieces. The city's high altitude left some orchestra members gasping for air. Seriously, they couldn't breathe. Donna Alberti, one of his singers, said she had to stop during practice because she couldn't breathe right and had nosebleeds. Crew members talked about being exhausted. Rumors spread of more serious problems, from pneumonia to a hidden heart problem. None were proven true. What was clear was that this time the damage went further than one night. Pierre admitted they had to send home about 125 crew and give back close to 40,000 tickets. The money loss was huge, but the emotional impact was worse. André himself said he was shaken. He said, "I cannot start a tour like this again." He was 74 years old in a business where age had already ended most careers. The orchestra that once seemed unstoppable had been stopped. For fans, it felt final. The quiet in Mexico City was described as like a funeral. No music, no final bow, just an emptiness that people filled with sadness. What made this hurt more was the difference. Just days earlier, André had walked on stages smiling, bowing, promising more nights of joy. Now, the same fans were watching his team roll up cables and load trucks in silence. The change was too sudden. In that silence, talk of death grew. Not an official death, not medical proof, but the cultural kind where people say goodbye to the thing that meant everything to them. André's past makes these rumors easy to believe. After the 2010 illness, doctors warned him about stress and long flights. At the time, he ignored talk of slowing down. He told interviewers he would perform until 140 as a joke, but this time he admitted his body was winning. He told the Mexican reporters he had to listen to himself more. That was not a retirement speech, but it sounded close. The orchestra is not a side detail here. It is his family. When one member collapsed with a heart attack in Nottingham in 2016, André delayed the show. He said, "The orchestra's health mattered more than the audience's danger." That statement now comes back ASA warning sign. Because if the orchestra's family and the leader is weak, what future is left? Fans feared not just the loss of concerts, but the death of a time period. André built his shows into huge productions that needed charter planes, custom stages, and months of practice. Few musicians have the size or discipline to replace him. His illness doesn't just pause concerts. It threatens the survival of the entire Johann Strauss Orchestra as a touring force. That is why people mourn so quickly. They weren't only thinking of André, they were thinking of everything connected to his name. Pierre now carried the burden. He became the face of logistics, refunds, and press conferences. His words carried double meaning. When he said, "The orchestra must go on," some heard confidence. Others heard a son getting ready to lead without a father. This is the weight we begin with. André Rieu didn't die in Mexico, but the silence there made people believe he had. For days, the rumor of his death traveled faster than the truth. And in a way, something did he that night. The idea that André could play forever without problems. That myth ended in Mexico. Don't worry, we will go in completely later. He had built an empire on music, yet it was never only his. The Johann Strauss Orchestra, the gowns, the waltzes, it all worked because André Rieu turned concerts into whole worlds. But behind the sparkle, there were cracks. The same orchestra that looked immortal had been through storms that nearly destroyed it. Musicians walked out. Tours collapsed under money strain, and more than once, The Rieu family wondered if the empire would simply disappear overnight. Pierre saw it all, not as a fan, but as the son forced to inherit both the success and the weight. The cracks showed most clearly in the 2008 financial crash. While others cut their spending, André kept touring, pouring millions into staging. It nearly ruined him. Cancellations followed. Rumors spread of bankruptcy, and suddenly the Waltz King looked fragile. For the first time, his music wasn't enough to silence the headlines. To Pierre, this was a practice run for what was to come. Because when your father is both a man and a brand, you learn early that one collapse always threatens the other. It wasn't only money. Health got in the way too. A virus infection in 2010 left André unable to perform for months. Fans whispered about his death. Headlines declared his career finished. And yet Hekame backbow in hand as if nothing had happened. But Pierre remembered the silence of that house in Maastricht, the cancelled rehearsals, and the look in his father's eyes. Fear, but also stubbornness. He understood then that the death of Aman and the death of his music might not happen together. But they would feel the same. That silence haunted the orchestra too. Members who had spent decades beside André started asking what would happen when he was gone. Who would lead? Would the orchestra survive without its founder? Or would it disappear like a kingdom with no heir? Every time Pierre heard those whispers, he knew they weren't only about who would take over. They were about his father's weakness, and yet none of them dared say it publicly. The myth of living forever had to continue, at least on stage. Unwilling to gamble their futures on a dream that might already be over. Pierre saw every person leaving not as betrayal, but as proof that the magic could vanish in an instant. To the public, his father smiled. At home, he wrestled with the question no artist ever wants to face. Had the music died before he did? The money pressure was brutal. Each cancelled show cost millions, and with production costs ballooning, the empire hung by a thread of ticket sales and sponsorships. André had always insisted on grandeur. Cathedrals transformed into concert halls. Fireworks timed perfectly to Strauss, sweeping movie-like recordings that made the orchestra look untouchable. But grandeur had a price. At one point, rumors spread that the family home itself might be at risk if debts couldn't be paid. Pierre never confirmed it, but he never denied it either, and his silence spoke louder than words. It was during this crisis that Pierre's role shifted, no longer just the son watching from the sidelines. He became the manager, the protector, the one forced to translate art into survival. He talked with promoters, calmed nervous investors, and protected his father from the ugliest details. In interviews, he downplayed the struggles, but behind the mask, he carried the weight of saving both the music and the man. If he failed, the legacy his father had built for decades would end, not with applause, but with silence. The strain showed on André's face. For the first time, fans noticed the tiredness. Critics wrote about Hissage, guessing about retirement. Every cancelled tour was treated as a signal that the end was near. Yet he refused to step back. Even when doctors told him to rest, he returned to the stage bow in hand, as if each performance was proof he had beaten death again. To Pierre, it wasn't courage. It was an obsession. His father wasn't just fighting illness, he was fighting time itself. And that obsession came with consequences. The orchestra began to crack in subtle ways. Musicians talked about leadership after André. Would Pierre take over? Could anyone copy the presence of the maestro? Fans loved the orchestra, but they came for him. Without him, Thempire was just another group of musicians. Pierre knew it, and so did they. It wasn't just the man at risk, it was the music itself. Then came the silence. In 2016, another health scare forced the cancellation of multiple tours. The details were unclear, the family tight-lipped, but insiders described it as a moment when André was forced to face his mortality. To the outside world, the announcement was simple: cancelled concerts due to illness. To those close to him, it was something darker, a reminder that his body was no longer invincible. Fans begged for updates. Rumors spread online that he'd secretly retired or even died. The truth was more complicated. The music had stopped, if only briefly, and in that pause, the illusion of living forever cracked wide open. Pierre carried that pause like a scar. He had watched audiences grieve as if the world had already lost him, even though he was still alive. It was a preview of their action the day the silence became permanent, and it terrified him because he understood something most people didn't. When his father's bow finally dropped, the loss would be felt not only as the death of a man, but as the death of an entire era of music. But the world wasn't ready to hear it. Fans held on to the fantasy. Reporters chased reassurances, and André himself kept promising more. Yet Pierre knew the truth. The music was already dying piece by piece, tour by tour, silence by silence. And soon he would be forced to say what no son ever wants to say: goodbye. It began like a rumor and spread like wildfire. André Rieu haddied. Fans in forums posted tributes. Strangers online mourned, and news outlets scrambled to verify. It wasn't the first time whispers had declared High's end, but this one felt heavy because a silence surrounded it. The orchestra gave no immediate statements. Pierre himself stayed absent, fueling speculation that the worst had finally happened. For many, it felt real because the truth was already half expected. How many times can a man defy illness, exhaustion, and collapse before the curtain finally falls? Tributes poured as if the story were fact. Clips of his concerts resurfaced. Fans remembered first dances, weddings, moments when his waltzes stitched joy into their lives. Entire generations had lived with his music as background to their happiest memories. To imagine it gone was to imagine the loss of something deeply personal. The grief was genuine, even if the facts weren't. And for Pierre, watching this unfold was like witnessing a rehearsal for the inevitable. But then came the correction. André was still alive. The tragedy wasn't his death. It was something quieter, harder to define, yet just as devastating. Piece by piece, the music itself had been dying. Each cancelled concert, each silence between tours, each strain on his body was not only the decline of a man, but the erosion of a world he had built. The Waltz King had not left the stage permanently, but his empire no longer carried the same immortality. Fans were mourning the truth they could not yet admit, that the sound they loved was slipping away. Pierre finally addressed it not in drama, not in a dramatic press release, but in reflections that revealed what the audience had always feared. He spoke of the fragility, the strain, the toll his father had paid to keep the illusion alive. He admitted what insiders knew, but fans never wanted to face: that the orchestral empire could not go on forever, that the silence, when it finally arrived, would not only claim the man, but the music with him. It was not a matter of if, but when. The irony was cruel. André had spent his entire life reviving waltzes, convincing millions that a century-old form of music still belonged in the modern world. He turned Strauss into a stadium spectacle, dressing nostalgia in fireworks and gowns. Yet, in doing so, he had tied his own life to a genre that could not exist without him. Unlike rock bands, unlike orchestras with rotating conductors, André's creation had no backup. Pierre could manage the business, but he knew better than anyone. The magic lived in one man's bow. Without it, the sound died. This is why fans felt grief even while he lived. Every time the stage went dark, they experienced death in fragments, in the pauses, in the silences, in the thinning tours. The tragic truth wasn't that André Rieu had left them forever. It was that they were already losing him slowly, relentlessly through time itself. And Pierre, more than anyone, was forced to watch as the world rehearsed its grief in advance. He once admitted that the day would come when Maastricht would fall silent, when the annual spectacle of waltzes under the summer skis would vanish, leaving only memories. He did not frame it as a concert cancellation or a retirement. He called it what it truly was, the death of music. And he carried the burden of preparing the world for it. But was it really the end? As some of you might have guessed, he's still touring. That's the cruel twist. Even as fans cry about his death, André Rieu was already preparing his stage for something greater. Not an ending in silence, but a farewell so loud, so theatrical, it would feel like a celebration of death itself. Because the Waltz King will not slip away quietly. He plans to go out with a bang. The proof is right there on his calendar. This year and next, his name is still on posters across Europe, the Middle East and beyond. Abu Dhabi in October, Cologne and Frankfurt soon after. Romania, Austria, Budapest. And then, as if destiny demanded it, Maastricht, his home, his stage, his cathedral. Themen they thought was dead is not hiding. He is building towards something only he could imagine, a concert series that doubles as his final salute, and it will not be subtle. He has never been subtle. Fireworks, cathedrals lit like heaven, orchestras dressed in gold. That is how he built his empire, and that is how he will close it. Each performance on this tour feels less like another date and more like another chapter in a requiem. One last grand narrative told not with words, but with violins. Pierre hashanted before that his father does not understand moderation. If André were to design his own farewell, it would not be a retirement party. It would be a staged funeral disguised as a spectacle. Maastricht would be like his final goodbye, choirs filling the square, voices layered over violins, until it feels like a cathedral in the open air. His orchestra swells not with sound but with history, every note carrying the weight of decades. And then the silence, that single moment when the lights fall. The bow lowers and the audience holds its breath believing he will return. But he does not. No encore, no curtain call, just darkness, as if the music itself had died before their eyes. That is the ending he has been rehearsing all along. Not death in a hospital bed, not fading away quietly, but death as performance. Theatrical, defiant, unforgettable.